Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. How are you, everyone? I hope you are all right, in good shape, in good sound and safe. In this lesson, we are going to discuss about the descriptive research. We already now in the week 5. We already discussed about the sampling technique and instrument and research plan and also types of research in the beginning of this semester. Today we are going to deal with the one of the type of research. We are going to discuss about what is descriptive research and what are the characteristics, what are the purposes of descriptive research, and then we'll talk about types of descriptive research, basically survey and longitudinal and cross-sectional studies. And we'll talk more about the instrument and method of data collection for survey research and for descriptive research. First of all, we'll see what is the purpose of descriptive research. When we define descriptive research, is a research which try to describe the phenomenon as it is. So we try to determine and then describe the way things are. We just try to depict, based on the information that we have collected, the demographic profile of a group of people, for example, or their perception toward the learning from home, for example. So it is what we call the descriptive research. We may also compare, based on the information that I have collected, the perception of subgroups of the people within the sample that we have selected. For example, whether the gender has some kind of can function as factor that differentiate the perception toward the condition right now. For example, working and learning from home. So subgroup, gender, men and women, how they perceive, we can find out whether the perception is different or not. How important it is descriptive research. In some cases, some students actually view that descriptive research is not a kind of scientific method. They consider that it's not as important as, for example, experiment or causal comparative studies. But actually, the importance is just the same between one method and the other method of research. It depends on the purpose of the investigation. So when you are trying to find out, for example, the people's opinion about one phenomenon, then descriptive research is the most appropriate method that you have to use. Descriptive research, including survey, for example, is one of the methods which is most frequently used. For example, now we are coming to the election of the Bupati and Wali Kota all around Indonesia. And there might be a lot of surveys on the electability of the candidates. So survey like that is very important. One of the purposes is to influence opinion. So the candidates may ask the survey institution to do that in order to understand and to know to what extent they might be elected during the election. And it may also use to to form opinion of the community, of the voters. Besides that, it's also important as a tool for investigating a variety of educational problems. Usually, the findings of descriptive research may lead researchers to a higher level of research design to, for example, experimental research based on the findings of the descriptive research. Next, descriptive research may be quantitative, may also be qualitative. So now we are talking about descriptive research in quantitative approach, not in the qualitative one. So they are similar in some ways and they are different in some other ways. The similarity includes the use of observation interviews to collect the desired data, the required data. So both descriptive research in quantitative one is similar in carrying out the research, especially the instrument. Both use observation and interviews. But then in terms of the data analysis, the way that the investigators find out their, analyze their information is that descriptive research in quantitative one is a kind of researcher's perspective, while the qualitative one is a kind of the participant's perspective. So we are doing the analysis by looking at the information, the data from our perspective. We try to describe the profile of the participants based on our opinion, on our views. But then in qualitative research, the analysis is based on the participants' perspective. How we carry out the descriptive method? There are 6 steps, which is similar to the step in scientific method, the generic one. So first of all is identifying the problem, and then doing the review of literature, and then select the participants and developing instruments, collect the data, valid and reliable data, and then we analyze the data, and finally we report the result of the analysis of the data as our conclusion or the answer to our problem. So basically, this is similar to the generic steps in scientific method. Common errors or some of the disadvantages of descriptive method, especially when you are doing survey, for example, is first of all the lack of participant response. When you are doing, let's say, mail survey, or probably using the Google form, usually we call it monkey survey, the participation is quite low, usually in between 60 to 75%. So if you send out 100 questionnaire, you may have 75 of the questionnaire returned to you. It's quite low. And also, in some cases, the instrument may have ambiguous items. So it is very important to develop a good instrument, because when the participants fill out the questionnaire, for example, the researcher, is not there. The researcher is not able to explain to the participants how to fill out and what the items mean. So these are the disadvantages of survey or descriptive method. There are several kinds of descriptive research. when we use different type of collecting data instruments. The first one is what we call the self-report descriptive method. What we mean by self-report is the respondent justify themselves about the item, how well this item applies to them according to their experience. So every time you use a questionnaire, then the research is called self-report research. So individuals respond to statements or questions about themselves. Usually the statement start with I. So I feel nervous when I am asked to speak in front of the class. So that means how well this statement applies to me. That is why we call it self-report. The second one is observation. We may come to a classroom and do observation during the process of teaching and learning. We observe how the interaction of the students and the teacher, the student and the students, and what kind of talk that the teacher are using and so forth. So observation is a kind of data collection instrument and technique that a researcher may use. And the next one is a test. Usually test is used when we are trying to describe the cognitive ability of the participants. So descriptive research may also use cognitive tests. For example, we want to find out the level of junior secondary schools ability in using English grammar. So we have to use tests. And in this case, the test should be what is kind of cognitive test. It's different from questionnaire. Questionnaire is what we call non-test. It measures the effective factors of the learners, while tests measure the cognitive factor of the participants. Next, survey data collection method. Surveys represent the most common type of self-report measures. Why? Because this is quite easy to do using the questionnaires and interviews. So the most common instrument and method that survey researchers use to collect the information is questionnaire or interviews. One of the advantages of using survey is that we use efficient time. We use less time in comparison to, for example, an experiment. In a survey or in a descriptive research, once you distribute the questionnaire, and then in 1 or 2 days, you can collect the instrument, and then the collection of data is completed. Now you are coming to data analysis. So it is very time saving. It may also uses less expenditure. You may spend less money in comparison to other research methods. We can also use survey or descriptive research by using larger sample. Maybe a greater number of people can be involved, can be asked to participate in the survey. This is a good news in one side, because we can collect information from a larger number of people. And you know, when we are talking about sampling, The larger the number of sample, the more probable that the sample represents the population. But also, if the sample is large, then you need, of course, larger supplies too. For example, you are using a questionnaire, you have to copy the instrument to more people. So you spend more money in terms of instrument, for example. There are 5 types of surveys. School surveys that involve the collection of information in the school level, school-wide research. So if we say school, that means that we include all the people or stakeholder of the school, from the principal, the administrative staff, the children, or the students, and also the teachers. So all the stakeholder or the people that are involved in the school may become our participants. So we also deal with the information about the school. And then the second type of survey is sample surveys. Use of sample representing relevant subgroups of interest. For example, we are talking about the perception of the English teachers on the learning from home, for example. And then we do not ask all the English teachers in South Sulawesi, for example, to fill out the questionnaire. We just select sample out of the population. There might be 1,000 of English teachers, but then we just select sample for about 100 per sample. So subgroup of the population. The third type of survey is developmental surveys. So this is examining variables that differentiate children at different developmental stages. Usually we call it longitudinal studies. We try to collect information from a group of children, or maybe a small group of children this month. And then 6 months later, we come again, and then we collect further information about the same phenomenon on the same people, on the same children. And probably at the end of the school year, we come again and then collect this information on the same group of children. So this is what we call developmental surveys. We follow the same children for a period of time, probably 1 year or maybe 2 years, and we call it developmental surveys. And then cross-sectional surveys. Cross-sectional surveys, we are doing the collection of information at one time from different group of children. So instead of following the same children for 2 years, we may collect information from children in year, for example, in class 4, 5, and 6 at the same time. So a group of children from class 4, a group of children from class 5, and a group of children from class 6 are completing the questionnaire, for example, at the same time. So this is what we call the cross-sectional studies. Developmental survey, and then longitudinal survey may have some kind of different subject. Take, for example, the trend longitudinal, cohort longitudinal, panel longitudinal, and follow-up longitudinal. Or you say trend survey, cohort survey, panel survey, and follow-up survey. So they are different longitudinal type of survey. Trend survey, we deal with the samples from succeeding group are studied over time. So this is what we call the one that I mentioned just now. So a group of children will be followed for a period of time. cohort, separate sample from a single group are studied over time. So, for example, today we are collecting data from class 4. Class 4 consists of 30 students, and we select 10 students today. And then about 3 months later, we come again to class 4, and then we select 10 students, but not the first one, not the first 10. So this is what we call cohort survey. Panel survey is a single sample from a group is studied over time. So this is the first one that I mentioned just now. You take 10 students from class 4. 3 months later, you come again and you collect information from the same 10 students. And then at the end of the semester, you come again and then collect information from the same 10 students. Follow-up survey is a sample study after a formal study is completed. So after collecting information from these 30 students, and then you may select maybe 5 or 10 students from them. You come over to them in 3 months later, or maybe 1 semester later, and then you collect information related to the issue that you are investigating. And this is what we call the follow-up study, follow-up survey. This is the step in conducting a survey research. The first one is state the problem, so it's always the statement of the problem becomes the first step in doing the research. And then you select the participants. When you are selecting the participants, once again, you go back to how we select sample or which sampling technique you are going to use. Once again, the best sampling technique is the probability sampling technique, the random sampling technique. Whether you are using simple random sampling technique or cluster random sampling technique or stratified random sampling technique or probably you are using systematic random sampling technique or probably multi-stage random sampling technique. The most important one is the participants should, or the sample that you are selecting should represent the population from which you select the participant. In terms of survey, for example, of course, when you select the participants, you have to ensure that they are willing to participate and they are able to provide the data that you require. So this is very important. And the third step is constructing the questionnaire or the test. If you are using test, of course, you construct the test. When you are developing the questionnaire, you have to consider the appearance. It is always good to have a good-looking questionnaire. There is sufficient space to read between the statements, so it is easy for them to read. For example, the statements should also be brief, not too many, but also not too few. So it should be efficient, should be sufficient enough to collect the information that you require to answer your questions. You have to be carefully plan the content and the item format. For example, if you are dealing with the motivation, you have to clearly plan about the sub components of motivation. For example, you are dealing with the intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation. You have to be able to develop items that belongs to intrinsic motivation and items that belong to extrinsic motivation. So this is what we call the clearly identify the subtopic. So the sub-element according to the theory that you are embrace on motivation. The best one when you are using multiple choice, so they only tick the what is the column, for example, or the answer. They just put a check. It is quite cumbersome when you ask them to write. So that it's good to have what we call the closed item questionnaire. So they just tick the answer. Method of collecting the data for survey, maybe we do not use mail surveys. Right now, what the students are most commonly using is the email surveys, or using the social media, for example, and then they send the link of the questionnaire, the Google form, and then the respondent will answer directly through their social media by clicking the link to the form. So email survey. Yeah, the advantages is quite quick, efficient, and inexpensive, easily standardized, and easy to score. The once again, the disadvantages is the we cannot assure the honesty of the respondent, their responses, whether it's true according to their experience or not. It's quite difficult to justify. Maybe the participant that we have selected do not have any access to the what is the social media, for example, or the internet or the email. So that's the disadvantage of email survey. You may also have the telephone surveys, but when you are using what is interview, you may interview the participants through telephone. You don't need to meet them face to face. Of course, this is quite good because there is no what we call the non-response, because when they are ready to be interviewed, then you will have the answer from that. The disadvantage is, yeah, you have to list all the telephone numbers of the required participants. Okay, and also an important issue is that you have to be skillful in doing interview. So when you are doing an interview, you have to be skillful enough. You have to be trained first to do the interview. And then if you are using a questionnaire, there are two types of administration. The first one we call the self-administered survey. So the respondent complete the questionnaire. So you just distribute the questionnaire and then the participant will fill the questionnaire. And the second one is the investigator administered questionnaire. So the researcher come to the respondent, to the participant, and then use the questionnaire to ask questions and then fill out the questionnaire. So it is a kind of a structured interview. So the questionnaire is filled out by the researcher, but it's very similar to respondent filling out the questionnaire. This is especially useful when you are dealing with the young learners, elementary and probably junior secondary school student. They may not be able to fill out the questionnaire yet. You may want to do it yourself. So you have to ask the student one by one. Or you may also come to a group of students when they are young learners, for example, and then you guide them how to fill out the questionnaire one item at a time, and then they fill out and go to the next item. So it's a group administration of the questionnaire. When you are doing interview, of course, we always appreciate the interview, because when you are doing interview, you'll have very deep information. You can you can find rich information from the respondent, because every time you have the answer, you can go further asking questions related to the answer. So it is different from questionnaire. Once they answer one item, and then you cannot follow up why, for example, they consider that important, that kind of item is important. Then if they say very important in a questionnaire, they fill out they tick out the answer very important. But then you do not have any opportunity to uh, for further ask question why they consider that important. In interview, you have that kind of opportunity. That is why we usually say you have a rich, complete responses, and of course, by using this interview. The disadvantage is that there is little standardization and takes time to be administered, quite expensive, of course. Why we call it little standardization? Because when you come to a participant, you may ask questions differently when you come to another participant. So there is no standard at all. Even though you have what we call the list of questions, what we call the list of questions or protocol or interview guide that will guide you to ask questions. But then when you come to different person, you may ask questions differently, even though the meaning of the question is quite similar. There are two types of items. Yeah. The structured item means close-ended, so they just tick the answer, and unstructured, open-ended. You may have a question which their participants should answer by writing their responses to it, some kind of essay questions. So when you are asking why, your first question is closed question, yes or no. When you say, do you agree with the policy of learning from home? And then the answer yes. If yes, why? So I'll give you reason why you agree, for example. So they have to write down. It is what we call unstructured questionnaire. When you are dealing with the affective factors of the learners, and then you have different kind of questionnaire. Usually the most popular scale of questionnaire is Likert scale. So sometimes a statement will be answered in a range of 5 scale, from the strongly disagree, undecided, agree, strongly agree. This is what the form of Likert style. When you have what we call the semantic differential, you may have a scale from, for example, very boring, very interesting. And there are 7 what is line in that. So from the very boring to very interesting, the participant only tick within this range of semantic differential. For example, the type of media used by the teacher, very boring or very interesting. So they just tick. That's what we call the semantic differential. We may also use ranking. For example, you are asking about the media that they like most, and then you have 7 or 6 types of media, and then they will write the rank number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so forth. So ranking. Checklist is when you are doing observation, you may have a checklist. For example, student activeness in the classroom, asking question, giving suggestion, and so forth. And once the student raise hand and ask question, you have a tick that as a checklist. You checklist that the student ask questions. And free responses, the one which is what we call the essay. You ask them to write their answer. When you are developing your instrument, there are a lot of requirement to have a good questionnaire or a good instrument. And I believe that this instrument development will also be discussed in another course called the language testing and evaluation, how to develop a test or questionnaire. So you can also use your knowledge from that course in order that you understand the relationship between that course and our course here in research. Yeah, qualities of good items address single concept. For example, you are asking question about the teacher competence. In order to be a good item, and that the object of the question should only be one. Do not use two objects at one item. For example, you are asking the teacher about their ability to develop media in their instruction. And then you are asking about their ability or their competence in doing that. And then you say, I am able to make and use picture for my classroom media, for my as my teaching media. So two objects to make and to use. They may be able to use, but not able to make, or probably they are able to make, but they are not competent enough to use. So do not use that kind of, this is what we call the address a single concept. And these are the, some kind of factors that may affect the quality of the items of your questionnaire. I would like to address this one, pre-tested. Usually when you have developed your questionnaire, do not use directly in the field for your research. Try to pre-test that. For example, you ask 3 or 4 students to fill out the questionnaire, and then after that you may get some feedback from the students, whether they understand well, whether the items are clearly and there is no ambiguity. Maybe they have suggestion, and then you can improve, revise the questionnaire based on their input, their feedback. So pre-test is important. Okay, the design. This is also important. I would like to mention 1 or 2 of them. For example, if you have a questionnaire, please do not make the statement very crowded. Please have what we call the white space between one item and the next item. Do not too close. Probably there is one space in between. So it is good to look, and also provide a kind of good feeling to fill out, to read and fill out the questionnaire. So appearance is very important too. And also give number to the pages, number of the pages and the items, so it is easy to refer to. Do not put important question at the end. So put the important questions in the beginning or right to the middle of the questionnaire. Another important factor is about the cover letter. So you have to have an information in front of the questionnaire, in the first page, to tell the respondent about what the research is all about, and whether you you mention about the confidentiality. it mentioned that the data that are collected from them is confidential, will not be published to anyone, to the public. A kind of statement that they are secure from the information that they provide for us. Okay, so the cover letter will make them safe when they read it. So you have to make the cover letter, the front page, the information is good enough for them and make them secure so that they can honestly answer all the questions. Okay, the next one is anonymity and confidentiality. Anonymity means that they do not have to put their names on the questionnaire. This will make them safe to answer honestly, because they say that the researcher do not know who completes this questionnaire. You can also ask them to write their name, but you state in the cover letter about the confidentiality, that the information that they provided will not be published to anyone except in the with this scientific meeting, for example, for the purpose of the research only. This is to make sure that the participant will answer honestly. Okay, so this is what we call the, I mentioned just now, pretest the questionnaire in order that you can have some feedback for revision of your questionnaire. Sometimes when the questionnaire has been collected, some of the respondents do not complete all the items. So it is also important that the participants fill out some kind of contact number. So when there is an item which is not filled out by them, you can call them and then ask to fill out that one item. Because if the item is left blank, you cannot use the information from that participant. You have to discard that, you throw away. So it's a good idea to ask them to have the contact number. So if the questionnaire is not completed, you may still contact them and then try to ask them to fill the item which is not completed yet. Okay, non-responses. Sometimes they do not complete the, they do not return the questionnaire. You distribute the questionnaire today, and then, for example, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, you come again to collect, and then they do not complete it yet, and finally, they do not do it. So non-response. Sometimes they complete, they return the questionnaire, but there are few items which are not filled out. So it's also called non-responses. Okay, I think this is the what we call the survey. Okay. When you are using a questionnaire, it is different from interviewing. When you are doing interview, you will have more in-depth information. It's quite flexible. You may have a good and honest information when you have a good rapport with the respondent. So you have to build a good rapport. If you have a good personal communication, then that will be good. And also allows immediate follow-up. When the answer is not satisfying, then you can directly follow up and ask him further question to get the required information. Once again, when you are doing an interview, you have to be skillful enough. So you have to train and train again yourself before you do the actual interview. Okay. This is the, actually, what we are discussing now is about using questionnaire and interview, but it's quite similar when you are doing tests. For example, you are intending to do a survey on the ability of the junior secondary school student in using English tenses. Then you may develop a test, and after that you can come to school and then you carry out the test, administer the test to your selected samples, and then the collection of information is done. You can return and then you start to process and analyze the data. I think this is the lesson on survey research. I'd like to thank you once again, and then you may have to read the related chapters on our textbook before you do the quiz on descriptive research. Thank you very much.